It was just after 7 when the last box made it into the garage. The sky had turned lavender behind the trees, and the air held that late summer stillness, not yet cool, but no longer hot. I wiped my hands on my jeans, leaned against the edge of the doorway, and looked back toward the house. Mrs. Alden, no, Rachel, as she'd reminded me to call her, was on the porch, already setting down 2 tall glasses of lemonade. My friend had left 20 minutes earlier, said he had to run a date, maybe, and he was halfway down the street before I even had a chance to ask. I stayed behind to help finish what we started. It felt polite. But now, it was just the 2 of us. She patted the spot beside her on the porch step. I sat. The wood beneath me was warm from the day, and I took the glass she offered without a word. Her hair was pulled up messily, a few strands stuck to the back of her neck. She smelled faintly like rosemary and something floral, maybe the soap from the upstairs bathroom. We drank in silence for a moment, the ice clinking gently in our glasses. Somewhere in the distance, thunder mumbled against the hills. She glanced sideways at me, then back at the yard. You really did all the heavy lifting today, she said softly, a little laugh under her breath. You're kind. Always were. I shrugged, didn't mind. Another silence. Then, without warning, she reached out and touched my face. Her palm warm, fingers resting lightly at my jaw, thumb brushing just beneath my eye, like she was checking for something invisible. You look just like my first love, she said. The air shifted. I didn't move. I wasn't even sure I heard her right. Her touch wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't motherly either. It felt like memory, like something cracked open inside her for a second, and I had nothing to do with it. She let her hand linger for a heartbeat longer, then pulled it back slowly, eyes distant now. I'm sorry, she said, almost in a whisper. That was strange of me. No, it's okay, I said quickly, but my voice was thinner than I meant it to be. She stood, dusting off her hands. I should get inside. The light's going, you can leave your tools in the garage. I'll lock up later. And just like that, she turned and went inside. No further explanation. No mention of who he was, or what I reminded her of beyond the shape of my face. The screen door creaked and then clicked shut behind her. I stayed where I was for a while, the condensation from the glass dripping onto my knee. The sky had darkened more than I realized. The porch light flickered on, casting a yellow ring around the steps. Somewhere inside, a kettle whistled faintly. I didn't know what just happened, not exactly, but something had shifted. A layer peeled back. And though I told myself it was nothing, that she was just caught in a moment, my heart was thudding, slow and certain, like it had heard something my mind hadn't quite processed yet. By the time the rain came, it was the kind that tapped against the roof like a quiet reminder you weren't going anywhere soon. I stood at the front door with my backpack slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, blinking at the radar. The screen glowed red and green. The street shimmered under the porch light. My car was parked 3 blocks down, too far, and too soaked. She didn't hesitate. You should stay, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Just for tonight, the guest room's ready. I opened my mouth to protest, something automatic and polite. But she was already walking toward the hallway, flipping on lights, her shadow moving across the wooden floor in soft, practiced motions. I followed her. The room she led me to was small but warm, tucked at the end of the hall with a window that looked out over the backyard. There was a narrow bed with a pale yellow quilt, a single lamp on the nightstand, and those curtains yellow too, swaying slightly where the window had been left cracked open. The air smelled faintly of lavender and rain. I wasn't expecting anyone, she said with a small smile, placing a folded blanket on the edge of the bed, but I like to keep it clean, just in case. I dropped my bag near the dresser and nodded, unsure what else to say. The silence felt gentle, not awkward. She lingered by the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. The hallway light behind her cast her face in soft gold. I can make tea if you want, she offered. Yeah, I said, too quickly. That'd be nice. We sat on the living room floor, mugs in hand. The couch felt too formal. She curled her legs beneath her and looked out, toward the window, where the rain had thickened into steady streams on the glass. Her feet were bare. The record player in the corner was silent, but I wondered what kind of music she used to play. The house had that kind of quiet, like it used to hold more sound than it does now. She asked me about school. I asked her about the house, nothing deep. But every time our eyes met, something hovered there, not attraction, not exactly, more like recognition, or a remembering we hadn't earned. Then came the question, have you ever loved someone who disappeared? She didn't look at me when she asked. She just kept her eyes on the rain, one hand wrapped around the mug like it was anchoring her. Her voice didn't shake. It was calm to calm. And I knew, instinctively, that the story behind it wasn't something she wanted to tell. Not yet. I hesitated. I thought about being honest, about saying no, but instead I said, yeah, I have. She didn't push for more, just nodded slowly, lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile, as if she'd known I was lying, but was grateful I lied anyway. Later, back in the guest room, I lay on the bed and watched the curtains dance in the breeze. The rain had softened, but the wind was still playing along the windowsill. I hadn't turned off the lamp yet. The blanket she left was warm, too warm for the night, but I kept it over my legs. It felt like something deliberate, something left with intention. In the quiet, I thought about what she'd said on the porch, about the man I apparently resembled, about the look in her eyes when she touched my face, not longing, not confusion, but something deeper, like the past had bled into the present. For just a second, I closed my eyes, not sure if I felt comforted or haunted, maybe both. The morning came slow and quiet, the way some houses seem to prefer. I woke to soft light through the yellow curtains, the smell of tea drifting down the hallway. For a few minutes I just lay there, listening the creak of the floorboards, the gentle hiss of the kettle, the distant chirping of birds waking in trees just beyond the glass. It felt like I was living someone else's morning. Borrowed peace. When I stepped into the kitchen, she was barefoot again, standing by the window with one hand on the frame, trying to coax it shut. A stubborn breeze pushed back. Her hair was damp, pulled into a low knot at the nape of her neck. She looked younger like that, not in a forced way, just softer. "Good morning," she said, glancing at me over her shoulder. "Need a hand?" She stepped aside without answering. I placed my hands on the wooden frame and pushed carefully. One side had warped from moisture, swollen just enough to resist. After a moment, it gave, sliding into place with a satisfying thud. She let out a breath and smiled. "Thanks," she said. "It always sticks after a heavy storm." She handed me a mug without asking how I took it. Still hot, no sugar, she remembered. We sat at the small table, steam rising between us, saying nothing for a while. The walls were lined with photos, framed prints from years ago. I'd seen them before, in passing, a younger version of her, smiling with friends, holding a baby, waving from the edge of a lake. But this morning, the stillness around them felt heavier, like they weren't just memories, but anchors. At some point, she got up and disappeared down the hall. When she returned, she was holding a cardboard box, the kind you'd use for sweaters or old letters. She placed it on the living room rug, knelt down beside it, and looked up at me. "I haven't gone through these in a while," she said. I joined her, unsure if I was being invited to share something or simply to witness it. Inside the box were photo albums, mismatched and worn, some with peeling corners, others with pages curling from age. She opened one gently, like it might fall apart in her hands. We flipped through the pages slowly. Some photos were faded, others sharp. There were high school dances, someone's graduation, camping trips with faces I didn't recognize. She narrated softly, "That's Michelle, or he was terrible at cooking." Then she paused at a black and white photo tucked behind another, not quite centered. She pulled it out and laid it flat between us. "That's him," she said. "That's Caleb." The boy in the photo looked straight into the lens, one eyebrow slightly raised, a crooked smile barely there. He couldn't have been more than 19. There was something in the shape of his mouth, the curve of his jaw familiar, like seeing yourself reflected in glass that wasn't quite clean. I looked up at her. "You see it?" she asked, not needing me to answer. "Yeah," I said anyway. She rested her hand on the edge of the album, fingertips tracing the photograph like she could still feel him through the paper. Her voice was quieter now, somewhere close to the breaking point. "He died in an accident. Motorbike. No helmet. It was stupid. Fast and final." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. "I was 20, she continued. "We had plans, some kind of life, waiting. And then suddenly, nothing. Just absence where a future was supposed to be." She closed the album slowly, pressing it shut with both hands like sealing a wound. We sat there on the rug, the rain from last night already forgotten outside. But here, inside the house, everything was still wet somehow. Her hand found mine. No warning, no hesitation, just her palm over my knuckles, thumb resting softly against the bone. Not possessive, not flirtatious, like instinct, like she was reaching across time, and the only hand left was mine. She didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. We just sat like that for a long time, two people surrounded by photographs of other people, holding a silence full of what was gone and what still lingered. The afternoon sun slipped through the trees in gold ribbons, casting long shadows across the backyard. I was crouched beside the garden gate, tightening the rusted hinge with an old wrench she handed me from the shed. The wood was soft in places, paint peeling from years of weather. She stood nearby, sleeves rolled up, holding a jar of screws like they might anchor something more than just the latch. "I've been meaning to fix this since spring," she said. "Feels like a lot of things get pushed off," I replied. She didn't answer right away, just watched the way I moved. Her eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in something quieter, reflection, maybe, or memory. When I straightened, she handed me a cloth to wipe my hands and disappeared inside for a few minutes. When she came back, she held 2 mugs of coffee, both steaming, both plain. But her hands trembled slightly as she passed one to me. I took it without saying anything, fingers brushing hers just for a second. She sat down on the low bench beneath the tree, and I joined her. What was he like? I asked softly, careful not to sound too curious. Caleb. She didn't flinch, didn't deflect. She looked down into her cup and began to speak like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. He was quiet, not shy, just slow to speak. He thought a lot before he said anything. People took that as weakness, but it wasn't. He was kind and honest in this almost awkward way. He used to tell me when my poems didn't make sense. She laughed, just once, then shook her head. He was patient, always thought he wasn't enough, though like he'd somehow fooled me into loving him. I stared into the yard, letting her words settle like dust. That sounds familiar, I said after a pause. She turned to me, slowly. I know. The breeze picked up, lifting her hair off her shoulders. For a second, the sound of wind chimes from the neighbor's yard filled the quiet. Then the moment passed, and she stood, brushing her hands together. That evening, she played music, a record from some old collection. The cover faded and soft at the corners. Piano, mostly, a few strings. No words, just notes that seemed to drift from room to room like they belonged to the walls themselves. We sat on the couch opposite ends, but still too close to pretend we weren't aware of each other. The lamp beside her was turned low, and everything else was dark. The windows reflected just enough of the inside to make the room feel smaller, more enclosed. She sipped from her glass wine now and looked toward the record player. I don't want to forget him, she said, but I don't want to stop living either. Her voice wasn't shaking. It was steady, certain, like she'd said it to herself many times but never out loud. Then, after a breath, she looked at me, not through me, not past me, at me, and asked, "Is that selfish?" I didn't know how to answer. Not then. There were too many things I didn't understand about her, about myself, about what was building between us in the silence and spaces, but I knew enough to recognize the look in her eyes. It wasn't desperation, it wasn't longing. It was a quiet kind of hunger, for warmth, for witness, for permission to still feel. And so I said the only thing that felt honest, double quotes, no, I don't think it is. She nodded once, like she'd expected me to say that, but needed to hear it anyway. Outside, the wind had settled. The record spun on, soft and slow, and neither of us moved to turn it off. The night felt heavier than the others. I'd packed my bag before sunset, not because I was in a rush, but because I didn't want to leave anything half done. The room with the yellow curtains looked different now. Lived in. There was a dent on the pillow where I'd been resting my head, a book I never finished reading still sitting on the side table. I zipped up my bag and left it by the door. The house was mostly quiet. I could hear her walking, softly, somewhere down the hallway. A cabinet opening, water running. Then nothing again. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure whether to knock. My hand hovered near her door, like it might make a sound all on its own. Then I finally let my knuckles touch wood. A pause. Then her voice. "Come in." She was sitting on the edge of her bed, wrapped in a long cardigan, feet tucked beneath her. Her hair was loose now, falling over one shoulder. The lamp beside her was dim, throwing warm shadows on the wall. She didn't seem surprised to see me. Maybe she expected it. I couldn't sleep. I said. She patted the blanket beside her, and I sat. For a while, neither of us said anything. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was just full. The kind of silence that holds more than words can carry. She spoke first. I used to have dreams where he came back. Not young, not frozen in time, but older, like he'd been somewhere else, living another life. And he'd find me again, and we'd pick up where we left off. I'd tell him everything. About the days he missed. About how angry I was at first. How small I felt for surviving him. Her voice caught for a second. She breathed through it. "I never got to say goodbye," she said. "Not really. I saw his face in the hospital, but it didn't look like him. It looked like someone leaving. I didn't try to fill the space." She needed to say it. She needed someone to hear it, not solve it. "Sometimes I wish," he said, eyes fixed on the floor, "he'd come back, just for 5 minutes, just to let me say it, that I loved him, that I let go of the anger, that I still carry him, even when I don't want to." She reached up then, slowly, and brushed my hair back from my forehead with her fingertips. The same gesture she'd made on the porch that first night, but this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't pull away. I let her hand rest there, warm and steady, her thumb resting just above my temple like she was holding a memory in place. "I'm not him," I whispered, "but I'm still here." She closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down, silent and unannounced. She didn't wipe it away. "I know," she said. I moved closer, not into her, not to cross any line, but enough that our shoulders touched. The kind of closeness that says I understand, even if I can't fix it. We sat like that until the lamp flickered once and then dimmed to nothing. The room faded into dark. She shifted, pulled the blanket over us both, and lay back on the bed. I followed, slow and careful. We didn't face each other. We didn't hold hands. We just let the distance shrink until it felt like something more honest. Sleep came in pieces. The house groaned in the wind. I listened to her breath, steady and human. For the first time in days, my chest didn't ache with confusion. It ached with clarity. I knew this wasn't a beginning, not in the way stories usually are. It was something smaller, stranger, more real. In the morning, I woke before she did. The sun was just beginning to climb, casting slivers of orange across the hallway. I packed quietly, made sure not to touch the creaky step near the kitchen. I found a scrap of paper in the drawer and left it on the table beside her teacup. I won't forget what you shared with me. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, first sign that summer was starting to slip away. I turned once, just before I reached the car, and there she was, standing in the doorway in her robe, arms crossed against the chill. She didn't wave, just stood there, watching, her eyes calm but full, one hand lifted, slow and certain. A gesture, without words. I raised mine back. Then I got in the car and drove away, feeling something settle behind me, not closed, not gone, but folded carefully into place.